Welcome, everyone. We're so excited to come to you this evening to the Closer Experience. If you haven't joined us, we hope that you enjoy this first time. If you have before, then you kind of know what you're in store for. It's going to be a good time. So let me tell you about the Closer Experience. The Closer Experience is a place where believers can grow closer to God. Here at TLC, we believe that making spiritual development enhances our relationship with God. And that is more than a Sunday experience. And our Closer community provides just that. So we want to make sure we help you get through the midweek to make it on to Sunday. This month, we're talking about, for the Closers, we're talking about relationships. And that's our focus for the conversations this month. Our pastors who are celebrating 20 years of marriage, yes, are bringing their expertise to the conversation this morning. It is one thing to preach about relationships, but I tell you, you got to walk the talk. And so it's another thing that they're going to be able to share with us some wisdom, some nuggets, some jewels along the way. So I'm excited about jumping into this conversation. So the topic is really marriage is hard work. So when I found out the topic, I thought, oh yeah, it's going to get good. So I'm going to need you to get your drink, your dinner, whatever you need to get comfortable, and get a notebook to take some notes, because there's going to be some good nuggets that I think you're going to be able to walk away from. So before we get started, I just want to remind you, my name is Elder Jeanette Pollock. I am with TLC, the elder of TLC, one of the elders of TLC, I should say. Well, let me just go ahead and give you my full title. I'm the senior elder of TLC. And I work closely with pastors Tony and Eleshia Cash, and I can't tell you how amazing that experience has been. So I want to give them just a moment to introduce themselves before we jump into some really good questions. So we'll start with you, Pastor E.
Hi, Pastor E. Glad to be here.
Of course, Pastor Tony.
Now, it's not going to be as dry as that intro they just gave us. But yeah, I just excited about this topic. I think relationships are always topics of conversation that we need to continue to grow and build and understand, because they can be very complicated. So I don't want to simplify or make it seem like this is, yet another conversation on relationships. It's a big deal. It's a big deal. If you look at the divorce rate, if you look at the situations going on in relationships, it's really an important topic. And so I want to jump into some really good questions. You guys ready?
Ready.
Okay. So what do you think about this statement? My spouse isn't religious, but God is still in my marriage.
I'm going to let you start.
My spouse isn't religious, you say, but I still believe, basically, they still believe
God is still in my marriage.
Well, I mean, I guess you have to define what religion is. I can only go by what God says religion is. And according to scripture, God says religion is that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this: look after the orphans, the widows in their distress, and keep oneself from being polluted by the world. So now, if you're saying your spouse isn't religious, but your relationship is still godly, I don't know how you're doing it, because if he or she is religious, they're doing those things and they're keeping themselves from being polluted by the world system. So I know that it's tempting to use the world's definition of religion. I know what they mean. Like, my spouse doesn't go to church, but still, I choose to use God's definition. And if your spouse is doing all the things of God, but there's just not religiously abiding by his ask of regularly dealing with your sisters and brothers, regularly coming together, then it's still not religious. So you're right, they're not religious. I'm trying to figure out how God is in it.
I'm going to play devil's advocate, because a lot of times what we see, especially in the dynamic of the church today, we see that there's no, make no bones about it, that women outpace men
Mhm.
when you talk about church attendance. And that sometimes is the measuring rod that we use for having a relationship with God, like who shows up to the tabernacle or to the temple, and so it's almost that theory about, don't judge a book by its cover.
Yes.
The outward pieces of it, is like the cover of what people see. And so based on that, people determine what your personal relationship is like with God. And a lot of times that we see that women outpace their spouses when it comes to church for numerous reasons. You can peel back and do the data, look at Pew Research to see why is it that women, historically outpace men when it comes to church engagement or religion or things of that nature. But a lot of times we find that women come to church or have this personal relationship with God, and then they have married spouses who may say, "Oh, I don't go to church," or "I'm not spiritually strong," or their spouse may be more connected to Christ. But God is still in our home. We still believe in God. Like there's this belief of God. There's this, okay, do I pray and do I bless my food? Yes. Will my spouse, if I ask him to come to church with me on occasions, will he come? Yes. But is he a regular church goer? No. But do I still feel like Christ is in my home? Yes, I really still feel like, this is a Christian home, although my spouse may not, outwardly have the habits or spiritually have grown, to that place where they're attending church. I remember growing up, when I was a little girl, my mom and I, we went to church all the time. And a good bit of our church going, it was she and I.
Okay.
It was she and I. It was, she and I for a good bit of it. And then later on, my dad came along at the church. And so if I had to just base my perspective or my upbringing based off of the fact that mom was the churchgoer for a good bit of my life, then that wouldn't be true to the outcome of who I am today. Eventually, my dad's a deacon. He's been serving as a deacon for many years that know him, but that was not the front line of his story. I mean, he has his own story where later on he came about, but my mom definitely sowed that seed of choosing a church, choosing a ministry, being that example of what it was like. And then eventually, he came on board, but we did grow up praying. We did grow up knowing God's word. We did. So God was in our home, even though one parent was more religious focused or spiritual focused than the other.
That's good. And that makes me think of that, yes, God can be in the midst and one could be the other. It's just that sometimes your energy, as we use language today, your energy doesn't match mine. Your behaviors and what you do don't necessarily match, but that doesn't negate that he still could believe in God.
Yes, absolutely. My prayer is always for that spouse, because that spouse could grow weary.
Yes.
Or it could be conflict of interest a lot of times, and the spouse wanting to do something with the church and the other spouse not wanting to do something, or the church or the spouse that's not there feeling like that the other spouse is churchy, all of those things that make up a dynamic when one person is more spiritually driven, more spiritually connected than the other spouse. But what I have found is that is always a continued prayer request for that spouse, is like, oh, that my husband or wife will come into the full knowledge of Christ, that my husband and wife will begin to lean more to Christ, that, those type of dynamics.
And I think as marriages progress and life goes on, there are many opportunities where the other spouse can become more drawn into. Yes. Because the prominent one that's involved is generally going to be the one that they're looking at, they're seeing how they handle it. So that's still a great example for them to begin to eventually come
Yes,
into the.
we were just fortunate. We have a very blessed story that we met in the church, So he picked me up in the church house. I saw him worshiping and stuff, and we were just friends. So we have a very unique story on how we met. I'm not sure if he came to the point in life where he felt like that's where he wanted to meet, his spouse, where he wanted to marry, because he was definitely dating a bunch of chicken heads before he got with me.
You just put it out there.
I can call them that prior to me. And but I ended up being the one that he saw his future with. So
Yeah, don't make any comments. Let it go that they're chicken heads. You don't even correct that. Don't even correct that. So let me jump to the next question, where we talk about, and especially today, I think it's so prevalent that we compare ourselves on so many levels. And I think that happens with marriages as well. So let's talk a moment about the comparison trap. Have you ever found yourself there emulating other marriages? And how do you avoid the comparison trap?
What do you think, Tony?
Go ahead. I'll piggyback off of you.
No, yes.
I mean, I never wanted to be like anyone else. So I'm kind of a unique person.
Mm-hmm.
Never suffered with that as a child.
Okay.
I come from very humble beginnings, poverty, projects, didn't have enough food, clothing at times, sometimes shelter issues. I never suffered. I just never suffered with my identity. So I'm very careful in judging people from that perspective, because I never had that struggle. So when people ask me about the comparison thing,
Right.
it's almost unfair for me to even, I can give advice on it, but I've never in all of my life suffered with my identity of looking at somebody else wanting that. I can say that one of the things you are missing, though, is that you're missing a great opportunity for self-reflection. Like while you're looking at them,
Right.
man, what a great opportunity for self-reflection. Constantly doing external comparisons takes away from the opportunities of making that inner person more whole, better, getting the proper relationships you need to be better, the training, the teaching. And so if I had to say one thing, I would say, don't miss this amazing opportunity you have for self-actualization, where you can spend that time looking at your life and how you can make what's good better, and what's better amazing. So,
and that's good. And I think we'll dig into that a little bit more in a couple of questions down the road, but that's good that you bring that in already. Yeah. What about you, Pastor?
Well, the thing about it is, I think I have a tad bit a different lens, only because when we first got married, we were surrounded by some great couples, right? They were already married. We had kind of linked up with them and at the church that we attended, and they had already been married a good bit of years. I would say maybe about 7 years. They had like 7 years on us because some of them had small kids. But I liked being around them because I didn't have that married couple relationships. I didn't have that. I think I was the first out of my friend group to get married. So it was new to me, and it was fun. And I remember it was fun, we'd go on married couple dates and go to the park. And, remember how we used to do, we used to get together. It was just, it was good times. And we were just, engaged and then married and young in our marriage. But then came one of the married couples that we loved dearly decided to get a divorce. And it broke my heart. Like, I was crying. getting a divorce. Like, it's like, oh my gosh, because they hosted every year this annual event that we had, remember? And we loved it because all the couples would get together. It's like 14 couples, and we would bring dishes. So it was just this big thing that kind of like grew. And I loved it. And I love seeing like the wives serve their husbands and just hearing of the stories, you know, and we share things, and that community of what marriage look and feel like was taking on a mindset of its own in my mind mentally.
Right.
So if you said, Eleshia, did you compare, you know, your marriage to other marriages? I did, because for some of them, I was inspired by it. I wanted what they had, not necessarily physically, but like what they had relationally.
Now, but is that the comparison we're talking about, or is that admiration? Because if she asked me, are there marriages that I looked at and admired at times? Sure. But the comparison trap is looking at their marriage saying, my marriage isn't good or great because by what their standards are. And I think everyone has their own unique path to success. I mean, I would never advise anyone to pattern their marriage after me and Pastor E. I just say to anybody, it's crazy how we are. But people who know us know it works.
Right.
But we are.
It is interesting.
It's very interesting. And so then you try to take this to your house. Your spouse is going to be like, where's the holy water? And it Beelzebub, because that's our unique path to success. And I've seen some marriages. I thought, okay, they seem like they have a good marriage, but I've just never seen one where I compared and thought, man, we can't. I think,
like so-and-so husband.
Yeah, no.
I mean, like, you know, it wasn't necessarily that component of it, like, oh, but you know, maybe you know, he would say, oh, you see how so-and-so wife is, she fixing her husband plate, or you know, like, of course, or he says stuff and she don't say nothing back, you know, like like those.
Yeah, but that was a white couple.
You see, here we go.
That wasn't a black couple. That wasn't a black couple. That was a white couple. I ain't seen the white couple where the sister let you say anything. I'll say that's a white couple.
Okay, can we just go down that road for 1 second? For whatever reason, he has this stereotype of other nationality couples when it comes to interactions, and I share him all the time. No, it's not that. Black women, we just don't tend to hide it well, or we don't tend to say, okay, when I get home, I'm going to, you know, it for us, it's almost like, you know, it is what it is. So that piece, you know, and I'm not saying all Black
instantaneous aggression.
Right. See, there we go.
I'm asking now. No, that was did she not? She said that you don't hold back. You kind of let us know. So I'm saying, is that like, instead of waiting later, like another cultural person may do, you all are like, you show your expression in that moment. That's what I'm asking, if that's what she means.
Absolutely. Yes. Because later on, when you're behind closed doors, you don't know what kind of heated conversations may be having.
Exactly.
They may be having, or their conversations, you know.
But that's probably what most brothers want. Like, we prefer that you can control your emotions in that moment, especially if we haven't been disrespectful. Now, if we've been disrespectful, I get it. But it just may be like a moment. Then that would be nice for, and I mean this for men too. Now, on that part.
Thank you for, because
definitely. I mean that.
And it's one of those, don't put each other in a spot. And if men were more self-aware of how their woman would react, if they know them, then they probably wouldn't do that. I know she's gonna go sideways, so I'm not even gonna say that. So I just think,
but here's the thing, though.
Awareness.
There should be.
Yeah, and I like the awareness thing. It's just that she should be aware that she's got a problem with going sideways and go get that fixed anyway. Because if you go sideways all the time, you might want to go forward and see a doctor and a psychologist.
So this can go so many different ways, but definitely put your thoughts in the chat because we want to engage. Perception and each other standing there. Everybody's got to come to the
Yes.
table understanding. If you know your spouse, then you don't say certain things that would evoke a reaction that you probably wish she'd not share. So it's kind of like, don't put that expectation that she's going to just be submissive or just hold it in. That's just not our style.
And that's
and you know what, in our culture of women, that's beautiful. To me, that's beautiful.
What's beautiful for you not to have self-control? Because that's to me what that is. It's a lack. That's a lack of self-control. And so for you to say, okay, so let me just, we're talking relationship. And maybe this is how God wants us to go, because we need to be real. Right. We're talking relationship and we're talking marriage. And to men, that's a lack of self-control. It's not beautiful to us. And if, for instance, like being a customer. So let's say that if you have clients and you think being very forward and direct is great, like that's a great something, but your customers are saying, yeah, but we don't like that. That's where I think both parties forget we're each other's customers. And as a man, I need to understand what it is you all like, even if something else is natural for me.
Right.
And I'm gonna put it on me because I had to learn that with her. And I'm still learning. I have to understand that some things I may think is very natural for me to do, blah, blah.
Right.
But what makes her as the wife happy, make her as the wife feel better and more secure, even though that's not naturally how I would be. I think that's where men sometimes would like for the woman to understand is that, yes, we're not saying not be strong, to not be strong, to not be thoughtful, or even to not have idea. It's a word I'm looking for, opinionated. Right. What we're saying is understand your audience and know that your audience will receive that in a certain way, and ask yourself, why do I have to do that? Let's say you have the right, because you do, but just ask yourself, why, and I'm talking about me too, because she and I talk about this privately. Why is it, Tony, that you feel that because you have a right, you have to do that? And we learn from Jesus Christ, that when Paul, I think it was Paul who said, though he had every right and authority to be God, he humbled himself as a man and gave himself as a ransom. In other words, and he said he did not think humbling himself was robbery. And I think for me, sometimes when I'm with her, I think humbling myself is robbery. Like if I humble myself, like it's taking away my manhood, it's taking away and I think that's where both parties have to understand that it's okay to not think humility to be robbery.
I think sometimes it comes down to the voices, the voices in our head and the voices.
That's good.
And the voices that we own. We have this voice, right? And sometimes the voice may be suppressed in other spaces.
Oh, that's good.
And so when we get in conversations and we're talking, everybody wants to feel respect and value.
Absolutely.
And everyone wants to feel heard.
Absolutely.
And sometimes when we get in spaces, other cultures are consistently heard, consistently valued, and they are able to, sandwich their language in a certain space because they've been trained that way because they've had so much to lose, But for us, you're gonna get it how you feel it because I have nothing to lose. And
you said that the other night.
Right, right. And so that part is, remembering, especially in Black and brown relationships, just remembering, the spaces that we're in, that, we support and we know each other because we know the way that we've come. At the end of the day, I want to be heard. I want to be feel valued. I want to feel respected. I want to know that, you know, your voice in this conversation is not the only voice that matters, that my voice matters too.
Amen.
And so I think a lot of times we get into to that comparison trap when we're comparing, you know, cultures, relationships
Right.
with spouses and how they move and how they respond and things of that
But you
nature.
said the other day though, but we do have something to lose. We say that because universally and in the past we really didn't have anything, but we have the respect and honor of each other to
Right.
lose. And when we do, we can learn from other cultures. We don't have to try to be them. We can learn from them. You can learn from anyone. That's why I was careful to say I don't fall into the comparison trap. But now as we deviated to another section of admiration,
Right.
I am not beyond admiring. Like I can tell you one admirable thing that I love about my wife is we do disagree and have disagreement, but 80% of the time she don't give in to my foolishness. I'm just this is just
I was
me.
thinking it was more like 90.
No, because I'm the type person who knows how to keep
Right.
pushing those buttons, but 80% of the time, why you said to me that's a big deal because I know more times than not she has self-control, and I admire that.
Right.
As a husband, I know sometimes it's things she want to say to me because I like to be married to me. Like people gotta understand, it's off the chain, my persona. Like what you guys, you know me privately, and you know how much I talk, but she knows the animated part of me. I'm loud, but I'm a good husband. I'm just a lot of personality. And yet I admire in her that most times than not, she said, you know what? Nope. I know what you're trying to do. And I want to say that publicly. And to her that I do admire that quality that she has, which is to me is a great form of self-control. And I know she's developed that because I know how I used to piss her off in the beginning. So I know
20 years, baby, 20 years.
I know she developed that. You have to work on that. That doesn't
Send
come on its own.
flowers, gift cards.
20 years.
Yes.
Hold on a little while longer.
So
Right.
I want to say thank you for that.
Awesome.
Oh, well, this has been a great conversation, and some of it off the cuff. But I think it's really important because it helps others in their relationships. One thing that came to mind as you were talking is, I think sometimes self-awareness, self-control, but I think there's got to be a level of communication so that if we're out in places and spaces, we remember that we're as one.
Yes.
And so you don't
I
do
agree.
things that are going to hurt me
Right.
emotionally or embarrass
I
me.
agree.
And I should be looking to
I
protect
agree.
you as the same. So
Yeah.
that shouldn't be really an issue that comes up. But again, if there's lack of self-awareness, if you're not seen as one, then that can certainly be a problem.
I agree. And I think not many people are going to agree with what I'm about to say, but I think what I have with her is something that she fought early on in the marriage, is that we are living examples. You know, the word of God says that we ought to be a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to
Right.
God, which is our reasonable service. Now, if you think about that, the only way to be a living sacrifice is to live a life where God and others can see. Ain't no other way.
Right.
There's just no. And so I think what happens in a lot of marriages, and especially men, are that they privatize love. Now, if you privatize anything, that means there's no outside influence, like a private company, like that people can do whatever they want to. And then when we protest, they go, oh, you forgot. We're not a publicly owned company. We are a private owned company, which means that our behavior and our actions are only ours to correct and change, and you can't do anything about it. Well, I think I see that a lot in marriage, where, especially with men, where they privatize disagreements, they privatize issues and challenges. They don't want anyone to know that they have any. And what I decided to do in my life, and forcefully bring her along when we were married early, is to be an open book. because I know people are fake. And I know people are not living these lives where they're always agreeing. And some people say, well, it's not everybody business what's going on in my house. Sugar, ain't nothing going on in your house that's not going on anywhere else that you can't help people with. And I'm not telling people to get out there and just show all your business.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is it's miserable being proud. All I know, I don't care what anybody tells, it's miserable always having to hide.
It is.
I know because I talk to people who deal with it. I knew this couple, and the wife said, all the years I've been with you, it's been miserable because my spouse will not let me share some of the pains we experience. So I have to sit in silence. And I mean, that person cried to me, and I have no reason to lie on this podcast. She cried to me because I asked, why don't you ever? And they had a wealth, but she said that he wouldn't allow that.
Well, that's the only way you can get free. You can only get free. It is a very, that's a huge stronghold to have to carry in a marriage. To say, because I grew up in what people consider like a private household. Like that was like, my parents are very conservative. They're private kind of people. And, my mom dare not see me on Facebook right now. Facebook? Oh my gosh. She just will just fall out in the floor. She's probably watching now and having a fit. But, that was my upbringing was that way. And so he's the total opposite. And I was like, they don't even know my business. I'm very guarded, type person, guarded personality. And I'll listen to everybody share their stories. And then they get to me, I don't have nothing to say, I don't have anything for you. But then it became a space in me, for me, where I felt God wanted me to help people. And I realized that I couldn't help people if I didn't want to share a part of me, like, that piece. I wasn't coming across relatable. I wasn't coming across that I have gone through anything before, and people can't identify with you if you can't, share. And then if you have this viewpoint that, your stuff don't stink, and that's just not the case.
And then you're giving all these anecdotal answers to problems, like, well, the book says this and this. Yeah, okay.
Exactly.
What's the phrase? People don't know how much you care about them until they.
The other way around. Just care comes first.
They don't.
People don't care how much you. People don't care how much how much you love until they know. People don't know how much you care. I don't know. Care.
Okay, we just missed that.
The one people won't remember what you say, but they remember how it make you feel. But I think you were thinking about the one that says, I don't know.
Yeah, I know the one.
I could Google it. Y'all drop it in the
until
chat.
They show until you show how much you care. People don't care how much you know until you show how much you care.
Yes.
So we kind of duct tape that together. I think you get the gist of it.
Yes.
I think you get the gist.
And if not, just erase that.
Rewind. I know our hour's growing late, but what I do want to do is there's a couple more questions that I think it's really important to touch on. And the last one is just kind of hopeful, and we can end on a more positive note. But let's talk about some of the reasons people get divorced. And so there's as I was YouTube University and Google University, there's some that came to mind, obviously, but just kind of get your thoughts on those 6 reasons. One, it's financial. I know I came into my marriage saying I can be poor all by myself. So I know finances, we hear statistically that finances is one of the main reasons people get divorced. Infidelity. What are some of the others that you have addressed in your counseling or that in your close marriage groups that have come across?
I think one of the number ones is false expectations. People come into the marriage, thinking it's gonna be like Claire and Cliff from
Oh, Claire and Cliff Huxtable.
Yeah,
Yes.
Claire.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not what it is. Or any other movie that Hollywood has painted
Right.
relationships to
Mhm.
be like. And marriage is just hard work. It's not that, it's the total opposite, because you just never know what may happen in a marriage, and you have to have some stick to itness to say, we're gonna get to the other side of this. And so when people come in with that expectation, that is gonna be easy, walking apart, always roses, gonna love you, he's always gonna be in love with me, I'm always gonna be loving him. And then when that feeling is not there, then they think, oh, that must mean this is not working anymore, right? And so when that happens, that leads to the big D word, which is divorce.
Marriage is hard work.
Marriage is hard work.
Yeah. If there's no other takeaway, it's not a bed of roses.
Yeah.
There's a song about it, but we won't go into it.
And I would like to come back and do a part 2, and we can talk more about it. I think, we can lean into it some more together.
I think that there's some real challenges that people need help.
Yes.
And because they're quiet, my spouse is that way. And I said, I won't say boo, but I said, no. So I need help. And so I think you can be dying inside.
Yes.
And that's Satan's tactic. And so I was refusing to let him have that hold on me. So not that everybody knows my business, but I've certainly garnered friendships with people in marriages that help to strengthen relationships. So I think a part 2 would be great.
Yes.
But I want to kind of end up on the question of what is essential for a successful marriage?
I'll just say adopt the concept that marriage is hard work. I would do that. I would say marriage is hard work. Adopt that concept of it, and once you do that, then we could, you can get through anything.
Absolutely, yeah. Pastor Tony.
Honestly, like to me, to fall in love with Jesus Christ, how I believe I have made me fall in love with her. I think that's the root of all divorces. When you're not in love with Jesus Christ, you can't be in love with a person, because when you fall in love with Jesus Christ, you fall in love with what he fell in love with, which is the redemption of humanity. And then you realize, oh, this is why you have me here. For every flaw I have, there's a strength I have to make her better. For every flaw I have, there's a word I have to make her better. I'm able to do this because it makes her life better. Like same way Jesus Christ did for us. And then like when you look in the mirror and see how much he did for you, and like how stinky and nasty and ugly you were, and he still said, I do. And you're like, but you're not like humans, because most times we hide all the things before the I do, and then the person says I do, and then we spring it on them. No, you says spring it all on me, and I'm still gonna say I do. First 5 years hurt me because I hurt her. We're 20 years in, I still have struggled forgiving myself for some of the ways and things in the 5 years, because when I fell in love with Jesus Christ and he showed me how I was, like that's all I could tell a person. I'm telling you, fall in love with him, and your wife and your husband, you realize, oh, I'm an A-type Christ. This is deep theological stuff, so I don't want to get deep, but when you look in the Bible and he shows you Abraham, David, they call them A-type Christ. They're not the Christ, but their behavior and actions are representative of the Christ that was to come. They were showing you he's going to be like this. like David was king that nobody suspected would be king. He's in the back, and all of a sudden he comes to. So that's what we are. We're A-types Christ. We really are set in these marriages to save our spouses, to show them the love that they didn't have within themselves, the gift of caring, perfecting understanding. And when I realized that, that's it. Oh, I'm really working for God in my marriage to save a soul.
And that's an amazing place to wrap up. And I'll just say thank you for, because I was tearing up because I saw you tearing up. It was getting really, you could feel the emotion and the sincerity. And so thank you. Thank you both so much for being vulnerable and open up and really talking real with people that are probably struggling and needing some guidance. And to end on, it first starts with knowing Jesus. All of this is good, but we always come back to where does it start? And that's knowing Jesus Christ. Thank you so much for joining us. It has been impactful. We hope you learned something from it. We hope that you drop some nuggets in the chat or some of your comments. But make sure you join us next week as we come back for the Closer Experience and talk more about relationship. Until then, have an amazing evening and amazing week.